Something extraordinary just happened, and Britain's Prime Minister is scrambling to contain it. Keir Starmer stood up and told the country that Britain is not broken, that the global order is stable, and that Britain's position in the world is secure. And then, almost immediately, the ground shifted beneath his feet. Because while Starmer was giving speeches and issuing calm statements, Washington made a move that sent shockwaves straight through Westminster. Greenland. Suddenly, the United States wasn't talking like an ally. It was talking like an owner. And Britain panicked. Emergency statements, rushed diplomatic language, talk of this special relationship being stronger than ever, promises of higher defence spending, whispers of trade, deals worth billions. Translation: please don't cut us out. Before we continue, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Britain Daily. It's completely free, and it helps us keep bringing you the hard-hitting stories that matter. Back to the chaos. Starmer wasn't just responding to a policy disagreement. He was responding to the terrifying realisation that Britain might no longer matter in the way it once did. And here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. This wasn't really about Greenland. It was about who sets the rules now. Because for the first time in generations, the United States is openly questioning the post-war arrangement, the one Britain helped to design but no longer controls. While UK politicians argue about language and values, Donald Trump is playing power politics. Cold, transactional, unemotional. Greenland was the signal, not the objective. On the surface, the argument is about Arctic security, Russian ships, Chinese influence, NATO stability. But beneath that is something far more dangerous for Britain. A new American doctrine that doesn't ask, what's good for the West? It asks, what's good for America? And if Britain, Europe, or NATO don't fit into that answer, they're sidelined. That's why Starmer's reaction matters. Not because of what he said, but because of how defensive it was. Because deep down, Westminster understands what this moment represents. The old assumptions are gone. The idea that Britain automatically has a seat at the top table, gone. The idea that America will carry the cost of Europe's security forever, gone. The idea that NATO is untouchable, shaking. And this is why the establishment is so desperate to frame this as chaos, recklessness, or Trump being Trump. Because admitting the truth is far worse. This isn't chaos, it's a reordering. And Britain, under Keir Starmer, is reacting, not leading. If you want to understand why Keir Starmer looks uneasy, why Britain is suddenly pleading loyalty, and why Europe is panicking behind closed doors, you need to look at one document, not a speech, not a tweet, not a headline, a strategy. Every American president is required to publish a national security strategy. Most are vague, carefully worded, full of platitudes about democracy and cooperation. This one isn't. It reads like a warning. No talk of leading the free world. No promises to defend global order at any cost. No moral lectures. Instead, it lays out a brutally simple principle. American power exists to serve American interests, and nothing else. That single sentence should terrify Westminster. Because buried in this document is a quiet but radical shift. One Britain was never meant to notice until it was too late. American politicians don't swear loyalty to NATO. They don't swear loyalty to allies. They swear loyalty to the US Constitution. And the Constitution doesn't mention Europe. It doesn't mention the UK. It doesn't mention NATO. Alliances are tools, not obligations. And that means if an alliance no longer delivers value, it can be renegotiated, downgraded, or discarded. And suddenly, the world starts making sense. Why peace talks are happening on American terms. Why foreign leaders are being summoned, not consulted. Why wars that were once non-negotiable are suddenly open for settlement. Permanent conflict is expensive, and this strategy treats war like a bad investment. Economic security is national security. That's straight out of America's founding playbook. Alexander Hamilton, not Woodrow Wilson. Trade over treaties, commerce over crusades, power over promises. Now look at Europe through that lens. Europe doesn't pay enough for defence. It relies on American security guarantees. It lectures while America foots the bill. From Washington's perspective, that's not partnership, that's dependency. And Britain, once the bridge between America and Europe, is no longer indispensable. That's why Keir Starmer keeps talking about values. Because values are all he has left to offer. But this strategy doesn't care about values, it cares about leverage. And that brings us straight back to Greenland. Greenland isn't European in this worldview. It's strategic real estate. It sits between America and the Atlantic, between Russia and NATO, between old alliances and new power balances. Control Greenland, and you control the northern chessboard. And suddenly, Britain's outrage starts to look like fear. Because this document makes something painfully clear. The United States isn't asking for permission anymore. Now comes the part nobody in Westminster wants to talk about. Because once you understand the strategy, once you see the document, once you accept that this isn't chaos but design, one question becomes unavoidable. Who loses? And the answer is uncomfortable. The losers aren't America. They aren't Russia. They aren't even China. At least not yet. The losers are the middle powers that built their influence inside the old system. Britain, the European Union, the permanent diplomatic class. For decades, Britain's power didn't come from size or force. It came from position. The bridge between Washington and Europe. The quiet broker. The trusted insider. But bridges only matter when both sides need to cross. And under this new American doctrine, Washington doesn't need Europe in the same way anymore. Security is being regionalized. Power is being concentrated. Deals are replacing doctrines. That's why things that once felt unthinkable are now happening. Ukraine is being nudged toward neutrality. Gaza is being reorganized. Iran is boxed in, not invaded. Endless wars are being quietly wound down, not out of compassion, but calculation. Wars drain capital. Instability hurts trade. And trade is the new battlefield. Even long-standing allies are being handled differently. Leaders aren't invited to Washington for photo ops. They're summoned, often to private locations, on American terms. Even Netanyahu wasn't welcomed to the White House. He was called to Mar-a-Lago. That alone tells you everything. This isn't diplomacy as Britain understands it. This is hierarchy. And Europe is discovering, very quickly, where it now sits. Below America, below American interests, below American patience. That's why the reaction has been so emotional. Outrage over Greenland, panic over tariffs, warnings about NATO collapse, accusations of destabilizing the world. But here's the question nobody asks. Who benefits from the old chaos continuing? Not ordinary people, not soldiers, not taxpayers. Permanent war-enriched defense contractors, NGOs, bureaucracies, and political careers, not citizens. And this is why the backlash is so fierce. Because this strategy threatens an entire class of people whose power depends on never-ending crisis. Britain's political establishment senses it instinctively. Their influence is fading, their access is shrinking, their leverage is disappearing, and Keir Starmer is trapped in the middle of it, trying to defend a system that no longer works, to an ally that no longer believes in it. So when you hear anger over Greenland, or speeches about shared values, or warnings about dangerous populism, understand what you're really watching. A world order defending itself, not because it's right, but because it's dying. The only question left is this. Will people accept a colder, harder, business-first world, or will they cling to a moral language that no longer matches reality? That decision won't be made in Washington. It'll be made by voters, in Britain, in Europe, everywhere. And the people who used to run the game know it. That's why this moment feels so tense, because history is moving, and not everyone is coming with it. This didn't start with Greenland, and it doesn't end with Keir Starmer. What we're watching is the collapse of assumptions that defined global politics for decades. In part one, we saw Britain panic, a prime minister insisting everything is stable, while scrambling behind the scenes. Because for the first time since World War II, the United States is no longer behaving like a benevolent guardian of the Western order. In part two, we uncovered why. A US national security strategy that replaces ideals with interests, alliances with transactions, endless war with hard-edged commerce. America isn't asking what's good for the West anymore. It's asking what's good for America. Full stop. And in part three, the consequences became clear. Middle powers like Britain and the EU are losing relevance. Diplomatic influence is shrinking. Moral authority is being replaced by leverage. Wars are being wound down, not because leaders suddenly found compassion, but because permanent conflict is bad for business. This isn't chaos. It's a reset, a colder world, a more honest one, where power is no longer hidden behind speeches about values. And that's why the backlash is so fierce. Because this shift threatens an entire political class, people whose power depends on permanent crisis, endless negotiation, and voters never being allowed to see the real rules of the game. Greenland was just the signal flare. The real message was this. The old order is over. The question now isn't whether this change is coming. It's whether ordinary people will finally be told the truth about it. So I want to hear from you. Do you think this is the end of permanent war? or the start of something even more dangerous? Is Britain being sidelined, or was its influence already gone? And is this brutal business-first world order more honest or more frightening? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read them all. If this breakdown helped you see the bigger picture, hit like, subscribe, and share this video, because the stories that matter most are the ones nobody wants properly explained. This story isn't over. In many ways, it's only just begun.